Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to look at lifecycle management. We're going to be using both S3 infrequently accessed storage as well as Glacier. So let's think about why we would use this. Maybe you have a business that generates a lot of data, maybe it's in the form of text files or images or something, but that data is only really relevant for 30 days or so. After that you might want to transition it from normal S3 to S3 infrequently accessed because the storage cost is lower. And then after 60 days, you might want to transfer it to Glacier and store it as a long-term archival, or perhaps you actually just want to expire the object or delete the object entirely after 60 days. So Amazon have a service for this. It's called Lifecycle Management. It exists within S3 buckets, and we're going to learn how to use it now. So this is a lab, and you will need to log into the AWS console. Okay, so here I am in the AWS console. Now, before we get started, I just want you to go over to Services and go down to Storage and click on Glacier. Now, Glacier obviously is for data archival. It's not available in every region, however. So if you click on Northern Virginia, you can see here that it's not available for Singapore and it's not available for South America. So if you are in either of those regions, please change over to somewhere where it is available. Otherwise, you won't see the same screens as the rest of us. Now, if we click over to Services, we'll go down to S3. I'm going to go ahead and create a new bucket. I'm going to create a bucket and we'll just call this a Cloud Guru Life Cycle Policies. Let's see if somebody's stolen this one. Go ahead and hit next. No one has. That's great. Click on versioning. I'm going to enable versioning for this. You can have versioning on or off for this lab. It's entirely up to you. I'm just going to have it on so that you've got the full, complete experience. Go ahead and hit next. I'm going to leave my permissions as default, so don't give anyone any access to it. Go ahead and hit create. So that has now created our bucket, a Cloud Guru Lifecycle Policies. Now we've got no objects in the bucket. What we might want to do is just go ahead and create the policies first before we upload our objects. So click in Management, we go to Lifecycle. It says here, use lifecycle rules to manage your objects. You can manage an object's lifecycle by a lifecycle rule, which defines how Amazon S3 manages objects during their lifetime. So it's basically a way to automate transition to tiered storage. So you can send it from S3 to S3 infrequently accessed and then onto Glacier or straight to Glacier if you wanted. You can also use a lifecycle rule which allows you to automatically expire objects based on your retention period. So it really depends on what it is you're using this for, but a lot of people do use lifecycle rules. Okay, so we'll enter a rule name. We'll just call it my lifecycle rule. So if I could type, it's a very creative name. We can add filters or tags here so that only specific objects with those tags or of those particular names would be able, this lifecycle rule would apply to them. I'm not going to do that. Let's go ahead and hit next. Now you can transition both current versions and previous versions. So let's start with current versions. We're going to add a transition in here. So we need to select the transition. So I'm going to transition my current version of my object to standard infrequently accessed storage after 30 days. So after it's been created, 30 days later, it's moved to a different storage class, which is infrequently accessed storage. In here, we've got another transition. So let's say transition to Amazon Glacier after 60 days of it being created. So we put our object up into S3, 30 days later it goes over to standard infrequently accessed, and then 60 days after the object creation, which will be another 30 days after it's been sitting inside standard infrequently accessed storage, it will then transition to Amazon Glacier. In here, we can do the same with previous versions. So we can add a transition. Now with previous versions, the object becomes a previous version days after object creation. So when, and this is a little bit tricky in its language. So when do we want it to move over? And of course, with previous versions, you probably, we could be, a little bit cautious and we could move it to infrequently accessed after 30 days. We can also then do exactly the same. We'll move it down to Glacier after 60 days. So we're always going to have a copy of our current version and the previous version in infrequently accessed storage on a 30-day cycle. And then after 2 months or after 60 days, it's going to move over to Glacier. So let's go ahead and hit next. We can configure expiration as well. So when do you want the object to expire? You could say the current version could be expired after 425 days from object creation, and previous versions you could also say the same thing. Don't know why it defaults to 425. It's an interesting number. In here it says you cannot enable cleanup expired object deletion markers if you enable expiration. So do just bear that in mind. Go ahead and hit next, and that's it. You can see your lifecycle rules here. This is a new UI. The old UI used to show it actually really, really cool. It used to create this really awesome graphic and show you, exactly how it all works. But you can understand it just reading it in here. Go ahead and hit save. And then that is it. That's a lifecycle rules. So it's not very difficult. There are a few hints and tips that you should remember going into the exam. So what are my hints and tips going into the exam? Well, it can be used in conjunction with versioning. So lifecycle management can happen either with or without versioning turned on. It can be applied to both current versions as well as previous versions. The following actions can now be done. So you can transition to the standard infrequently accessed storage class. It has a minimum of 30 days after the creation date. Your other options to archive it off to Glacier storage class. Again, that is by default 30 days after you migrate it to infrequently accessed storage, if relevant. You can also use lifecycle management to permanently delete objects as well. So it's a really simple topic, guys. It's not much to it. Really going into the exam, you just need to understand it at a high level. You'll probably get scenario questions where it's talking about all these different objects and you want to minimize on storage costs. What should you look at using? Well, of course, you would use lifecycle management. So just understand it at a high level. Okay, so that's it for this lecture, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.